every individual with a LinkedIn network has an audience, and they've got a platform for sharing content. So the companies that are driving more business, that are getting more inbound leads, whose salespeople are having an easier time getting appointments, are the ones that have that visibility and credibility in the market, and content sharing is a big part of that.
I want to welcome you to my sales podcast, where we have one focus and one focus only. That is helping you, the sales community, and sales leaders create more conversations with more qualified buyers, ultimately leading to improving your sales productivity and closing more deals. Each show, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, and connect with more buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., and you're now listening to the Selling with Social Sales Podcast. Oh, guys, Selling with Social is here. And guess who I got with me right now? I've got the man, the myth, the LinkedIn expert himself, Mr. Kurt Shaver.
Woo, woo, woo. Here we go, man.
Of Vengreso. And you guys know him. He's my counterpart. He's one of the co-founders for Vengreso. And it's been about a year and a half since I've had you on the show. Kurt, where have you been all my life?
I've been selling stuff.
You have been selling stuff. You've been doing an amazing job. Congratulations on all the success so far. Many new logos. Excited to see that. But I brought you on today's podcast to spend some time talking about our latest and greatest research report. I know our CMO, Bernie Borges, is listening right now, Kurt Shaver, and he hates to call it research, but guess what? It's my podcast, Bernie, and we're going to call it a little bit of research. But no, it is a report.
I'm with you. I say it is research.
It is research. It's a report. It's a report, and it is around the state of digital selling with LinkedIn, published by Vengreso. So all of you listening in right now, you're going to find some amazing insights about how your sellers, or you as a seller or as a business owner, are or are not using LinkedIn correctly to engage with your buyers. And I'm excited about this. But first, before we get into some of the meat here, Kurt Shaver, you know my standard question. Tell us something nobody would know about you by looking at your social profiles. I want something juicy. Now, we've had something really juicy on our show. We had someone with an extra appendage. So give me something good. Something good, man.
All right. So this is kind of a twofer. Number one, I was in Olympic Park in Atlanta, Georgia in 1996, hours before the bomb went off there. If you can remember that far back, 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia. I was there a few hours before the bomb went off in Centennial Park. And at 9/11, when 9/11 happened, I was in downtown New York City, Manhattan on 9/11. In both cases, I called up my wife when the incidents happened to reassure her that I was okay, and she was asleep both times. She was like, "What? Huh? What's going on?" I tell people that story, and a lot of people say, like, "Oh my God, I'm getting away from you. You're unlucky." And I'm like, no. That is a glass half empty perspective, my friend. I am very lucky because I am standing here in front of you right now. So that is not on my social profile. I have 9 lives.
Well, first off, I'm glad that you were lucky, that you're safe. That's a good story. You'll have to let Debbie know that we took a couple pokes at her. Yeah. I love it, man. Well, listen, everybody who's listening in, they may not remember you. They may not know who you are, but you obviously are a chief sales officer and co-founder of Vengreso. You've got a long history of sales and sales leadership roles. And brought you into Vengreso as part of one of the co-founders of the company, and you've been sitting in the CSO role ever since, helping us scale the company. So congrats to you and all the things that you're doing with our sellers and really putting this all together. One of the things we want to talk about is this State of Digital Selling report that we have put together that is extremely insightful, right? Extremely insightful. And I want to spend some time talking about that today because there's a lot of folks who are probably listening in and wondering, is this thing called LinkedIn legit? Number one, should I have my sellers learn how to be better at leveraging LinkedIn? Number two, and talk to me more about this whole thing called digital selling. I want to spend some time, and for those of you listening in right now, you can find this report at stateofdigitalselling.com, stateofdigitalselling.com. I encourage you to download this report. It is accessible on the vengreso.com website. So first off, Mr. Shaver, talk a little bit about just the general overview of this report. Why is it insightful for sales leaders?
Well, we interviewed over 800 salespeople, and we asked them about 10 critical behaviors. Again, this is the state of digital selling. Most of them are about LinkedIn behaviors, but not all of it, because digital selling involves more than just LinkedIn. And again, I think a number of these are very eye-opening in terms of what people are doing or are not doing, especially when you hear really some of these behaviors are so critical to selling. They're so fundamental. I mean, every sales leader's going to hope, and a lot of them are going to expect their salespeople are doing them. But let's see what the data says.
In this report, there were over 12, was it 12 contributors? Is that right?
Yeah. Experts. Yep.
Yeah. Companies like SAP to Zoom video communications and inside sales, and even Joel Lebon, one of the marketing and sales professors at Johns Hopkins University.
The pride of Mauritius.
The pride of Mauritius, exactly right. For those of you that don't know where Mauritius is, you need to look that up. But we've had from him, and we had Corporate Visions involved, CSO Insights, which is a division of the timing group. A lot of individuals that helped with the contribution of this particular report. So we're not going to be able to talk about the 10 points. Right? There were 10 salient points that sales leaders need to think about and need to, well, quite frankly, address within their own sales organization, especially if you believe that the modern buyer has changed. So I do want to focus just on a couple of points here, man. And first off, let's talk about first things first, and that is different types of media and a profile. Now, this was very insightful, that some of the findings that were found in this particular report. I think the number was it 3 out of 5 sales reps didn't share or don't share any type of media on their LinkedIn profile? Is that some of the findings there?
Pretty much, yeah. So 60% of the people surveyed had no media on their LinkedIn profile. Hey, let's back up a little bit. LinkedIn started in 2003, 16 years old, not exactly new. For about a third of its life, it looked pretty much like the Google page. It was just all text, but then realizing that, hey, a LinkedIn profile is basically a web page. Probably, 10 years ago, they started to add the capability to add different types of media. So we're talking about we're talking about document, really any kind of a digital file, documents, images, presentations, and even video. So these are all things that when you look at the LinkedIn profile of a salesperson and realize it needs to be appealing to a prospective buyer, obviously, you want to use more than just text, and you want to use those media elements on there. So if we looked at some of those things, all of those percentages were below 30%, docs, images, presentations, and videos. And again, 59% of people have nothing on that. Why does that make a difference? Hey, let's use like a real live case study of why that makes a difference. And one of the folks that is featured in this report is Chris Sikora, who's the Vice President of Marketing for Strategic Enterprise at CenturyLink. And many of the listeners may know, about less than 2 years ago, CenturyLink made a major acquisition of Level 3 Communications, 2 big telecoms coming together. And one of the results of that was thousands of level 3 salespeople all of a sudden are now representing CenturyLink. But guess what? A lot of them hadn't even changed their LinkedIn profiles. And we're talking for months and months and months and months. So CenturyLink realized, hey, in order to reinforce the brand, in order to present this unified, image out into the market, we need to get all of that cleaned up. And so by providing the right YouTube videos and providing the right branded image across the top and providing the correct branded white papers and images and things like that, simply the result of that was thousands of now aligned professional profile pages that are reinforcing the brand. So that's just one of the reasons why, when viewed on a corporate basis, why aligning sales reps' profiles, partially through the use of media, is a really important benefit.
And you give a great use case there for branding or a corporate rebranding or an acquisition. But another normal use case for day-to-day, correct me if I'm wrong, LinkedIn reported in the State of Sales report published by LinkedIn themselves at the end of November, December timeframe in 2018, that buyers reported 62% of buyers said that they look back at a rep's profile to determine if they are going to engage with them. Right?
That is correct, sir.
So if you think about this, and all the leaders listening in, marketing leaders especially, what's the message to them? Like, aren't these personal pages, my personal page as sales rep, whatever it might be, sales rep, national account, major accounts, mid-market, small business, even an individual entrepreneur, solopreneur, whatever the case might be, what's the message that we should be taking from here that buyers are going to look back at my page, and what should I have there for them?
Again, you want them to represent the company in the most professional light, right? Most companies, if they're going to go invest in a trade show, what do? At a minimum, they probably get everybody the same golf shirt, right? Something like that, right? It's got the colors, it's got the company logo. I mean, they might totally equip them in a uniform, but they might just say, hey, everybody wear khakis or black pants or something like that. But we want people to show unified. We want them to support the brand, right? We want to do all those elements that are going to just reinforce what we're trying to do with the brand. And so the profile is just one other aspect of reinforcing the brand.
You bring up a great illustration around trade shows. Certainly, before you send your crew out there on the trade show floor, they're looking alike. They even have the same material. You don't have 25 different people out on the floor, especially if you have a big booth, or 5 different people in the booth handing out different types of pieces of material. It's a unified approach with unified messaging, right? That's the same thing I think with here that we're trying to say for leaders listening in is, wait a minute, 59% of sales reps reported that they're not using any type of media on their LinkedIn profile, but yet we know 62% of buyers are going to that person's profile and looking for information as to whether or not they should engage with them. And to your point, there's no unified messaging from a branding perspective, but also too, these are, quite frankly, mini company abc.com websites or landing pages, right? We need to have messaging that attracts the buyer, not detracts or distracts, like with quota crushing sales rep, right? Or Kurt, you can't see Kurt, but he's standing up with his quota. With his shirt that says "I crush quota," right? Like his "I crush quota" shirt, or best contract negotiator. We've seen some of that one.
Oh, you got to give the credit for that, courtesy of Seamless AI.
Seamless AI. There you go. That's right. I crush quota. There you go.
There's a plug for Brandon.
Yeah. There's a plug-in for Brandon right there. So I think it's super important that leaders take a step back and say, whoa, wait a minute. Think about this, Kurt. With salespeople, in addition to the trade show, what are the other things that we standardize messaging on? We've got auto signatures, right? What else do we do for our sales reps?
Telephone scripts, PowerPoint decks,
email scripts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cadences that have a sequential set of messaging, but yet we don't do this for our sales teams for their profiles. And you want your salespeople out there doing what? Engaging on LinkedIn? Oh, you're killing me, people. You're killing me. I'm pretty passionate about this, as you can see. They're killing me, Kurt. They're killing me. All right. Let me move to another point here. Research showed most salespeople are not super connectors. What does that mean?
Well, that means that salespeople are not taking full advantage to grow their digital Rolodex on LinkedIn by connecting with prospects, customers, referral sources, and other people that might benefit them in their business ecosystem. If we look at the statistics on that particular question about connections, we had 4 different categories: 0 to 250 connections, 26% of the people in that range, right? That's way too low for most B2B sellers that actually have a responsibility for some of their own lead generation and prospecting. The next category was 251 to 500 connections, 18% in there. 500 to 1,000, 26%. So we can see that almost 80% of the people are below that 1,000 mark. Now, if you're listening to this and you think, 1,000, wow, that's a lot of connections, realize that LinkedIn's own research correlated top performers in a number of different industries with people that had salespeople that had more than 5,000 connections, right? So that is a high bar, 5,000 connections. And again, on this survey, there are only 23% of the people responded said they had more than 1,000 connections. So it's very important to have large numbers of the right people. We always hear the naysayers say, oh, it's not just about quantity. And the response to that is, you're right. It's not just about quantity, but it's also not just about connecting with the people that you've met or that you know or that you used to work with. That is way too limited in today's network, digital, internet world. And so to look at things up into the thousands range is where you're really going to be able to benefit one of the next stats we're going to talk about, which is introductions, referrals, and being able to leverage those common connections. Mario, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the idea of having a connection strategy.
That's a very good point on the connection strategy discussion here, right? So if you think about it, the research showed, you said the numbers were 0 to 250, 26% of respondents said that. 251 to 500 connections was 18%. So that's roughly 50% of sales professionals who use LinkedIn have 500 or fewer connections. Now, I'm just doing some rough math. Like, we know that the average number of decision makers that are inside of any one account is approximately 7, right? So we think about this and we took 20 accounts, just on average, 20 accounts inside that someone may be responsible for, just 20. And we multiply that by 7 people. That's 20 times 7 is 140 possible contacts. Now, many of our sellers, even though there's, the transactional sales reps, there's SMB, mid-market, most of our sellers generally are creating a top 10 or a top 20 every single month. They may be changing those out, not all 10, sometimes all 10. So if you just think about that, if I've got 10 of these per month, 10 top accounts that I'm trying to penetrate every single month, I'm now into 120 times 7. That's 840 contacts that I should be connecting with and bringing together this network. But to your point about the connection strategy, most sellers aren't thinking of what you called this digital Rolodex. Because the reality is, Kurt, you and I don't have this. That big giant turning ball, right? Like the thing we indexed our business cards with from A to Z. Who has that on their desk anymore?
Yeah, nobody.
I literally, in the cleanup of my office just recently, I had over 500 business cards that were sitting here on my desk. And I started going through them. I'm like, connect. Why do I even have this? I stopped going through them and I took them all and I threw them into the recycle bin because I'm connected with these people through the platform called LinkedIn in this case, right? But there is a point to driving a connection. And it has to do with what we teach in part of our phase 4 under connecting of our Selling with LinkedIn training program. There's a point to becoming a connector, not just with quantity, as you mentioned, but with quality, the right kind of people that are going to buy from you. And I think the challenge that we're seeing is that sales reps aren't putting 2 and 2 together, and sales leaders aren't inspecting this as well. Like, did you connect with John, Susie, Billy, Mary, Mark, and Nancy? Did you connect with all these folks? The 7 buyers? That is a problem. But why Why? Why do we care about that, Kurt? And I think that goes right into really going into leveraging your network for asking for what I would use as asking for referrals.
Yeah. I mean, the other reason it's really important that I can just put some specific color around is both of our backgrounds, mostly in the technology space, and certainly a lot of our clients are. And one of the phenomena from everything in technology going digital, going SaaS, going cloud, all of those transformations or trends have resulted in one fact, and that is increasingly IT decisions are made outside of IT, which means that line of business owners, a general manager, a VP or somebody like that, right? Hey, what do they got to do? Oh, just tell 40 people in their department to go swipe a credit card on this online site. They don't have to stand up servers anymore and go buying software. That's old fashioned. So what happens is all of a sudden IT in a lot of cases loses that control over the buying decision. So if you're a old school IT salesperson and all your connections are only in IT, and now those decisions are being made outside of IT, guess what? Your competitors are going to line of business people, and they're getting decisions made before you even know about it. And so a lot of times when we are working with technology companies, when we are putting together their connection strategy, part of that is, to Mario's point of 7 decision makers in an account, you make sure if 3 of those people are your traditional IT connections that you've known for the last 20 years. Who are the other 4? Are they people that you don't know? You better find who they are and connect with them and establish a relationship and find out what their buying criteria is, because the decision may get made outside of your traditional network.
And of course, for those of you that listen into my show here, you know that you shouldn't just be connecting without actually personalizing. And we've talked about this before on leveraging the PVC sales methodology, right? Personalize, bring value, have a call to action, even in the connection request message. So for those of you listening in, sales leaders, please don't go out and tell your sales folks, hey, who are the 7 buyers? Go connect with all of them. There is a way to connect in order to be able to get your connection request accepted. And by the way, you can find out more of that how by listening into the PVC sales methodology, and specifically listen to that particular podcast, and that'll help you out as well. And we'll put that into the show notes as well. So, Kurt, one of the key strategies for growing your connections, that is, and developing a connection strategy is to look at how to leverage your network for referrals. Now, we all know from sales, from the beginning, from the time that you started selling to the time that I started selling till present day, referrals are powerful. In fact, according to research, 84% of B2B buyers start the purchasing process with a referral. And 90% of all B2B buying decisions are influenced by peer recommendations. And we heard this from even our entering into the mind of the marketing executive buyer. The 3 CMOs actually specifically spelled out that they're going to their peers, asking them, what did you do? How did you do it? Who did you work with? Who do you recommend? So that was also something that we heard about as well. So what did our research show when we developed this report around sellers on whether or not they're asking for referrals or not asking for referrals through their LinkedIn network?
Well, Mario, I hope your sound guy has one of those sad trumpet sound effects. Because the answer is more than half of the survey respondents said they have not asked for an introduction or a referral from someone in their LinkedIn network in the last 3 months. More than half have not asked for a referral in the last 3 months, right? That is just a terrible waste of resource. I mean, we've used the analogy that LinkedIn is like a Rolodex, I guess in some ways, but a Rolodex would never tell you, would never display for you who your common connections are that could get you to this particular prospect, but LinkedIn does. And so to not use that is a tremendous waste of really one of the most fundamental benefits of LinkedIn.
More than half? Oh my God. It's killing me to hear this. It's killing me to hear this as a sales leader, that more than half of the sellers or respondents What was the number? 51%? Is that what it is?
Well, 51% responded 0, but 4% said they don't know how many times, which I would pretty much say that's a 0.
Yeah. So 55% of those surveyed out of over 860 respondents said that they have not asked someone in their LinkedIn network for a referral in the past 3 months. My God, what are we doing as a sales community? Like, I think about that, and it's like every day I am looking at my network and I am looking at who can get me to who I want to get to in my target accounts, right? Or my target industry or my target whatever. Standard 101 sales, I'm wondering, what have we missed? What have sales leaders missed?
They don't know the process to do it. And one of the things I want to point out here, because I think everybody knows the value of referrals, and now they know most people aren't using LinkedIn to do it. But one of the things that I talk about a lot when we're teaching people how to get referrals on LinkedIn is beyond the obvious of getting you to that target prospect, right? That's obvious. But think about something that's not so obvious is, just the act of actually reaching out to the common connection. And we have this 2-step process, which you've probably talked about on other podcasts. I'm not going to go into the methodology here, but just the act of reaching out to that common connection to ask for the referral, that can have benefits, even if the person says, that common connection says, oh, I don't really know them that well. Because you are engaging with somebody else in their network, right? So there is the possibility that common connection should say, I don't really know that person that well, even though they're in my LinkedIn network, so I can't help you with an introduction. But I'm glad you called me up, actually, because I was just talking to our CEO about ways that we were going to increase this or that. And I thought of you, but I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to reach out. So again, just having a conversation with somebody in your network, usually a good thing. And sometimes they're going to say, oh, yeah, I know that. Great. In fact, I'm having lunch with them next week. I'll be happy to introduce you and suggest you guys have a call.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think one of the keys to this issue here is what you said earlier, and that is the how you go about leveraging your network to ask for a referral. And for those of you listening in, I think I've announced this a couple times here, but we invested over 3,932 hours into developing the state-of-the-art, most robust and comprehensive LinkedIn training program out there on the market. And we take the time to go through how to go about using the 2-step process to ask for a referral. It's not hard, but most reps don't know how, and they feel uncomfortable trying to get into someone's office. But guess what, guys and gals? Your buyers are asking for recommendations, peer recommendations. 90% of B2B decisions are influenced by peer recommendations. So this has got to be something that we as a selling community, I think, Kurt, we've got to become laser focused on developing a connection strategy to what we talked about earlier, which then transcends into building engagement, relationships, and rapport that allows us to be able to go back to this network and leverage the network to be able to get into new people's offices. And fundamentally, I think that's something that we have to do as a selling community and be better at it. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. The last 2 things we talked about, the network and getting referrals, that's the core. Business is always built on relationships, and those are the 2 fundamentals.
Yeah. Now, doing so, building a connection strategy, leveraging your network for engaging and creating a referral network bodes an amazing opportunity for staying front and center in front of your network when you do something else, and that is share content. Now, a lot of sales leaders listening in right now, Kurt, are probably saying, I don't want my salesperson to become a content marketer. I don't want them out there wasting time sharing content into their network. Before we answer that question, let's talk a little bit about how often did sales reps talk about sharing content within their LinkedIn network?
Well, if we look at the statistics, this one is probably the biggest opportunity to gain a competitive advantage because the behavior is so low. We asked, how often do you share content with your LinkedIn network? And 39% said never, and 39% said a few times a month, which is almost never. So if you put those two together, that is 78% of the people surveyed are essentially not really sharing enough content to make a dent in their network's mind. They're not building their visibility and they're not building their credibility. So why is this important? It's important because the average B2B buyer consumes 5 to 8 pieces of content from the winning vendor. So you cannot put that burden all on marketing's shoulder anymore, because probably half of the time that prospect, that buyer is engaged, it's going to be after marketing has passed the ball to sales, and now they're in a sales cycle, and sales is involved with the communication. So the salespeople need to be supplying what we call content for sales in all the way through the sales cycle down to close. Part of the way you do that is by sharing content on the LinkedIn network. So again, we're looking at almost 80% of the people aren't doing that. They're not raising their visibility. They're not raising their credibility. Who's filling the void? Their competitors that have learned how to do it. Of all the things we've talked about so far on this podcast, this is the new skill for salespeople. As you said earlier, Mario, since the beginning of time, salespeople have had to build up their Rolodex. They've known about building connections. They've known about asking for introductions, right? That was sales, but sharing content, man, that's a marketing thing. Well, not anymore, because every individual with a LinkedIn network has an audience and they've got a platform for sharing content. So the companies that are driving more business, that are getting more inbound leads, whose salespeople are having an easier time getting appointments, are the ones that have that visibility and credibility in the market, and content sharing is a big part of that.
Now, let's put this in context for the sales leaders listening in as to, yeah, that's nice, sharing content, but does it really make an impact? And this is where I love Tamara Shanks. She's a research director from CSO Insights, which is the research division of the Miller-Heiman Group. And one of the things that she brought out in her commentary in the report at stateofdigitalselling.com was that only 33% of organizations have a content strategy in place, and only 32% have implemented an integrated social selling strategy across marketing and sales. You're probably listening in as a sales leader or a marketing leader saying, oh my God, we got a content strategy. Is that number really that low? The number really is that low. That's based upon research, right, from CSO Insights. Now, what I loved about this, Kurt, and let's put some numbers to this, why it's so important. 78% have shared never or just a few times a month, which is, as you said, pointed out, completely not even noticeable. They won't even make a dent, right, in helping you to become more efficient and better at selling. And ultimately, what our focus is either create more conversations or to increase win rates. Now, hear this out. I believe she was quoted, and she said, win rates can be improved significantly by 12% with a content strategy and 9% with an integrated social selling strategy. And so I think sellers that are listening in, if they want to increase those win rates, first off, sales needs to go back to marketing and say, what's our content for sales enablement strategy? And if there isn't one, then we need to create one. If it's all focused on product, then we need to create one. And that's one of the things that Vengreso has been really focused on, is that selling with content strategy, helping marketing organizations put together the content for sales enablement strategy before you go out there and tell a seller, go share content, right? Let's make sure it's the right content. Then once you've got the right content, we call it the bait, right? Well, once you've got that right content, now let's develop the right type of sharing strategy. But most organizations try to share the content first before they've done what you talked about earlier, which is develop a connection strategy.
And before they've upgraded their salespeople's profiles to reinforce the brand.
So sequentially, this almost goes back to the 6 phases of digital sales transformation for a sales rep, right? You first have to start with, do you believe that the world has changed around you? That's the mindset.
You believe in the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Do you believe in this thing called the internet? Once you believe or have come to believe in this thing called the internet, now the next phase of the 6 phases is really about transforming the brand, which is what you talked about earlier. the right consistent messaging, then teaching a seller how to find and engage, then teaching them how to connect the right way with the right messaging, and then teaching them how to feed that network with valuable content. Those 4 steps must take place before you can get to the feed strategy, which is, nurture that network with content, right? So I think it's really important that we understand the lack of sharing content with, in this case, 78% are sharing it a few times or never. The lack of sharing content, would you argue and would you agree, Kurt, that it's hurting sales organizations?
Absolutely. It's hurting the individual seller. It's hurting lead generation. It's hurting the reputation of the company in the market because they're not getting seen. They're not visible. They're not as credible.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cost of doing nothing is significant. And I think the point here is that sales leaders are now being opened up with this information to, I'm going to go march to my marketing CMO's office, the CMO, I'm going to go pound on his or her door and say, what is your selling with content strategy? What is your content for sales enablement strategy? And do we have a distribution strategy? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and I'm going to look myself in the mirror as a VP of sales and say, holy crap, before marketing starts whipping up this amazing content, do I even have the right messaging on my profiles for my sellers and a connection strategy to create connections? Now, that there was a ton more content that was identified because we actually had, I think there was 10 key insights. Is that right from the report?
Yes, that is correct.
Where can people go to download this report and actually get all the details around these 10 insights that I think we only talked about 4. We talked about 4 today out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just go to stateofdigitalselling.com and you can download the report along with the 10 action items to help boost your sales team's LinkedIn behaviors.
And ultimately create more sales conversations and increase your sales win rates.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Oftentimes we're asked the question, Kurt, and I'd love your opinion. We're asked the question from sales leaders, can't you just come in and do like a half day, a couple hour workshop and teach my sellers how to use this thing called LinkedIn? I mean, come on, it's not that hard, right?
Yes, actually it is. The answer to that is you need to change people's behavior. Now, depending on the experience of your sales force, they could have been in business a couple of years or a couple of decades. But in any case, if you're really trying to change people's behavior, it takes months, not hours, to change people's behavior into consistent habits. They're going to produce those results. So the expectation really just comes down to how much results do you want? How much change do you want? How much more pipeline do you want? In order to do it right, yes, it takes really months to implement the right kinds of behaviors.
Are we talking to like going back to our old college days, right? In order for me to learn a subject and to somewhat master it, I got to spend a semester inside of a course, learning from a professor, doing my homework, going to my GSI, my graduate student instructor, getting personalized coaching. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good analogy for it, right? So whether you're learning a subject in school or you're learning a golf swing or you're preparing for a marathon, right? You can't go to a 1-hour webinar and think you're going to go out and run a marathon. You can understand intellectually what you need to do to train, but you still better be training for 3 or 4 months. So going to university, perfecting your golf swing, getting prepared to run a marathon, all those things take time. Changing behavior, man.
There you go. So if you want to download the report, which I highly encourage you to do, download the report, guys, stateofdigitalselling.com. It's there. There's a ton of the points that we talked about today. There's actually some different points. We've actually have a portion of that that's ungated on Vengreso's website, So go to stateofdigitalselling.com. It'll be in the show notes as well. And Kurt, if someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way? Are you on Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, all of those. They're all Kurt Shaver. Kurt Shaver on Twitter, Kurt Shaver on LinkedIn, or you can find me off the Vengreso homepage.
Fantastic. And my final question to you, my friend, your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Okay, now don't give me any like cheesy all here, but my all-time favorite movie is The Wizard of Oz. I love that movie. That's an awesome movie. And for everybody's thinking like, that's a kid's movie, I just ask you to think back the very first time you saw that movie when you were 4 years old, and it scared the daylight out of you with those flying monkeys. So it's got it all, man. It's got it all.
Which character do you most resemble, Kurt? Which one are you? Are you the Wizard of Oz, or are you the monkey, or are you the lion? Which one do you most correlate to?
I think I like Scarecrow most of all.
Scarecrow. All right, guys. Well, listen, I encourage you to connect up with Kurt Shaver, the man, the myth, and the legend. Make sure when you reach out to him, send him a personalized connection request via LinkedIn and tell him you heard him on Selling with Social. And for all of you listening in right now, go out to stateofdigitalselling.com, download the report, gather those insights. And if you need any help in helping your sellers really understand and learn how to leverage digital selling, whether that be LinkedIn, video, Twitter, reach out to Kurt, reach out to myself. We're going to get you started and we'll get you in the right direction. Hey, thanks for listening to the Selling with Social Sales podcast. Did you enjoy that show? If so, would you do me a huge favor and give the Selling with Social podcast a rating and review on iTunes? That would be super awesome. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to Vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com and click on podcast. From there, you'll find the Selling with Social podcast. Thanks for listening in. And until the next show, be awesome. Mario Martinez Jr.